So a number of things came up during my last video to Jericho Movie that I feel some merit in addressing. There are also a number of comments on my video and some of Jericho's videos that I want to visit or revisit, and I've stripped off usernames because I don't want this turning into a drama fest unnecessarily. If we look at the broadest definition and define philosophy as the overarching umbrella that spans all rational inquiry, then it would be silly of me to naysay it, obviously. My point, and shame on me for not choosing my words carefully, was not to crack down on all philosophy, simply the idea that argument trumps observation. Let us attend to some of the aftermath. I am well aware that science and philosophy are related and interconnected, but I have apparently failed to distinguish the type of philosophy I do not find appealing or at all rational. It seems obvious that any rational thinker would consider as much evidence as possible when weighing an argument, and all too often some YouTube philosophers go around ignoring well-established scientific theories or attempt to disprove them without sufficient knowledge of the evidence. I'm looking at you, apologists. Example. Anyone proposing a philosophical argument against evolution should not simply assume that evolution is false and build an argument as to why. Rather, they should weigh the evidence, and a mighty scale indeed would have to be employed, and then explain why we observe apparent common ancestry, ERVs, fossil mutations, etc., but have reached the wrong conclusion. Accept reality, argue from there. Given the evidence, there is no parsimonious explanation that doesn't involve the creator of the universe being a giant mischievous prick. This pretty much sums up what I should have said. Empiricism and induction might not lead to absolute certainty, but ignoring or misrepresenting the conclusions that we can draw from reasonable certainty cannot lead one toward any sort of enlightenment. Hopefully Jericho will agree when phrased thusly. Consider that most embarrassing passage relating to Noah's flood. The Bible, which self-asserts that it is the Word of God, also asserts a great many foolish and physically impossible tales. There is no evidence that a worldwide flood occurred at any point during the last 4 billion years, let alone the last 4,000. Knowing this, how can we not abandon faith in the Bible's inerrancy, and thus in the deity who allegedly helped write it? If it's supposed to be perfect, we have only to show one instance to falsify that claim, and we have plenty of hammers and nails at hand. This brings me to a related point. Ideas are not dependent on their origins. If a hobo on the street wrote down some letters and numbers that turned out to be the unified field theory equation, and we could independently verify as such, would that make it any less true? Obviously not. Science is not beholden to its precursors any more than astronomy is to astrology, chemistry to alchemy, or neuroscience to phrenology. A lot of people said this, I am aware of it, and it is absolutely irrelevant to the topic at hand. Oh, and there was plenty of idiocy going on, as with all videos. Just wanted to say we all frown on comments like this. And England is kick-ass, for the record. Should it? Really? I'm pretty sure that neither of the two originals, my response or his counter-response, could be classified as ponage videos. Maybe in Victorian times, but really, this is way too tame for that label. Yes, science is dependent on philosophy, as is all rational inquiry. The flip side of this grubby shilling is that philosophy is, or at least should be, both considerate and contingent of empirical observation and inquiry. Else it's nothing more than internally consistent denialism. And my original point that observation should trump argument is especially important when considering worldview efficacy. Science changes the game in a way that no other subset of philosophy could dare hope to. And arguments don't build infrastructure. And to beat a dead horse into gooey carpet, yes, this is what I meant. This is somewhat baffling to me, and I readily admit that I lack the philosophical acumen to properly articulate it. Suffice to say, it does work. If it didn't, how could the universe be rational? We consistently observe, and always within margins of error, that the universe plays out like clockwork so long as our variables are properly controlled. Results are independent of observer, and Jericho admitted that science is the only tool to investigate objective reality. I reject this wholeheartedly, and we have proof right here on YouTube that this is not the case. Opinions vary wildly. Every single controversial video by a prominent atheist is attacked, criticized, or outright condemned by other atheists who disagree. We are not a bunch of robots parroting Dawkins, and to suggest otherwise is scandalously disingenuous. If anything, we are the most contentious and divided group, and our variance on every axis is epic, save one. You don't become an atheist or a skeptic without a deep burning hatred for bullshit. More idiocy, this time cracking right down on scientism, which also deserves mentioning. This is it, straight from the wiki's mouth. I wholly subscribe to this, with the following caveat. Yes, I know science isn't perfect, that changes are inherent and things have to be revised from time to time. That too, if only for consistency, should be part of scientism. If new data shows that we're wrong about something, we are obliged, intellectually and honorably, to change our minds as well. I don't see any problem with this because it's essentially saying, let's go with the best evidence we have, and if we are wrong, then we should endeavor to become right. That may be an overly personal interpretation, but it seems in keeping with the spirit of scientism. Note, I am not advocating dogmatic adherence to anything, nor do I think that being empirically oriented locks one into a paradigm. If anything, it serves as a near airtight seal against a host and litany of bad ideas which prey upon emotional appeals tucked under the guise of being open-minded. The purpose of a filter is to remove the non-desirable elements, right? Science filters brilliantly, even if it needs to be recalibrated from time to time. We adapt. In my video I referred to near certainty's utility in the absence of perfection. Jonathan responded that while a natural explanation about my vision is most likely, it's not something to be certain about. I disagree on practical grounds, and I do so because macroscopic quantities of light are eminently predictable. My nearsightedness, and crack your jokes now if you please, has to do with the shape of the lenses in my eyes. Both are defective differently, and thus my spectacles require 2 different prescriptions. By varying the shape of the lenses, my vision is corrected, and this applies to all lenses of all materials, and we understand the concept and manipulation of light very darn well. Jericho did not suggest that imps or fairies obscure my vision, rightly so, and yet that it could even be considered otherwise baffles me. We understand light. We know it travels in straight lines and predictable patterns until interference or obstruction come into play. Setting quantum weirdness aside for now, there is nothing mysterious, and to consider otherwise seems pointless. Again, until better evidence is shown to say otherwise. But because they are attached to humans, we attach undue attention and significance to eyes and other human parts. Again, this to me makes no sense. Your eyes have lenses not so different than a camera except in composition. Our skin and bones are not so unique, and it's all molecules at the end of the day. We are animals. We evolved. Why then are we forced to endure tiresome notions of souls and spirits, of otherworldly ape gods smashing planets together out of the void? Such whimsy is devoid of critical thinking and of merit, and until we have empirical evidence otherwise, I waste no time considering myth and superstition. Now, during the Rational Dawn's video blitzkrieg, there were a lot of arguments put forth about the existence and necessity of a creator deity. Fine. But it was never satisfactorily tied or attributed to one of the human conceptions, and honest scrutiny of any human holy text laid beside a hypothetical omnibenevolent intelligence will reveal as much. The logical abstractions of deity do not cause me any dissonance or ill will, as it's an interesting and harmless intellectual endeavor to tease apart what a god should be like. Do that until your noses bleed, but start saying, hey, this perfect being is exactly like, insert pre-existing deity here, and eyes will roll with appropriate velocity. I'm sure I fundamentally disagree with Jonathan and many of his commenters on many points. I respect philosophy as a whole, but I do not approve of the abuse of logic, nor the neglect of considering all the evidence, nor the construction of arguments devoid of empirical grounding in reality. At the end of the day, good science and good philosophy should resound harmoniously, and the awful din of half-baked apologetics and pseudoscience will ever a displeasing chorus make. I hope we can at least agree on that. Until next time, fair people, Buddha smile upon you all.